Welcome to Lifting Leaders Podcast, where we are unleashing leader possibilities to make a better world. I'm Crystal Roberts, and together with Trisha Ryan, we're diving deeper into some of the complexities of the world's most critical challenges and exploring innovative ways of navigating through them.
Through interviews with experts and leaders just like you, we're exploring what it takes to thrive as a leader today and examining new ways of thinking about how to creatively lead into a more equitable, socially responsible, and sustainable future. And the future starts now.
Hi, Trisha. How are you doing?
I am great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
You know, Crystal, this has been such a fun couple of months.
It has been. I've loved our special series, and we're wrapping that up today. Our special series, Opening Our Hearts to Make a Better World, as a starting point to making a better world. It's been quite a journey, and just as a reminder for anyone who's maybe new, hasn't heard what this series was about, we embarked on an exploration of the theme, Opening Your Heart as a Foundation for Making a Better World. And we explained it this way, that opening your heart is the beginning of any transition. You must be able to see a better or different vision and hold hope and believe in new possibilities. Opening your heart isn't just about warm sentiments or fuzzy feelings. It's about unlocking the most potent force within us, the heart, the seat of courage, compassion, and connection. And we certainly saw that in our speakers.
We did.
When we open our hearts, we are able to dismantle the barriers that separate us. We become architects of empathy, builders of bridges, and healers of wounds. And we explored over 10 weeks what it means to open our hearts to ourselves, to others, and to the universe. We heard from 7 guests, visionaries, and fellow travelers who have harnessed the heart's power to transform lives, organizations, and entire communities. And unlocking that power have the keys to making a better world. So we had 7 guests.
Yes, we did. And each one was so different and so special. They brought different perspectives on this series and on, the topic that we chose. And I just really, I felt like every time I listened back to the podcast, it's one thing to be here talking to them in the moment, live chat is fabulous, and you have to go back and listen to it sometimes to really grab all the nuances that you might miss when you're in it, right? But I got something different from each one of them, and to me, collectively, it is still just a drop in the bucket of what all of this really is. But they were very special drops, right?
That's for sure. Yeah, we launched with Peter Block and talking about his new book. And then we also talked with Lindsay Godwin about her book around curiosity. We talked with Kirsten Carpenter and her daughter Regina Winkle-Bryan around opening your heart through travel and art. Yes. We also had that on location in New York interview with Victoria Campbell and Andrew Coupin, as we talked about kind of living your dream and opening your heart through music. Yes. And our last guest was Glodine Champion, and just really rounding it out with her LOVE, LOVE, her LOVE acronym, and how important that is to opening our heart. And we had 3 gems.
Yes,
that
we
were part of that as well, and a coach's corner.
We got a lot in there. This was a great series, I think. It was hard to not continue it. I felt like we were on a roll. So we had these wonderful guests, absolutely fabulous guests, people who we look up to and who we have been following more recently, but certainly passionately, in a sense, because of who they are and what they stand for. I just thought we could keep going on and on and on with this, but then we never end the series and we'd have to change the whole trajectory of the podcast. What do you think?
Well, what I thought was interesting about that was it did feel that way. Yeah. Like the more we thought about who would be good guests and that sort of thing, is it could go on, and that opening your heart comes from so many different places.
Yes, it does.
And I think for me, that was one of the key takeaways, was there's not a formula for this.
No.
That it really is very individual. We certainly saw some key patterns, but that it can come from just a wide variety of things. Everything from changing your career path, from organizational development, when G. Victoria is talking about that, organizational development, to writing musicals, to art, doing art with young children with needs, and how that opened their hearts to beauty and confidence and seeing more possibilities. And those were just some of just a couple of the guests.
Right.
So that for me was pretty incredible. And underlying all of that, which I thought was so interesting, was, and Peter Block started us on this, he quickly saw that this was about love. Opening our hearts was about love. And we didn't use that word love in any of our opening script thoughts, but that became a really important theme throughout. And so that's why it was so perfect to end with Glodine, specifically calling out love and her acronym around that it really is, opening your heart is really all about love.
I think everything is about love. And I think to call it out with respect to leaders, and we believe everyone leads. So but calling it out so that it's not a scary concept, and I hope that our listeners got that. I hope our listeners started seeing that hearing that there are some patterns that we saw we heard over and over again. Right? Yeah. But they all came from, to your point, from different perspectives, from a different point. And we may have pulled something out of one and thought that, yeah, that's it. That's it. That's so cool. That's just amazing. And then the next guest would come on and talk about something completely different, like Lindsay's questions. It's like, wow, I never really thought of it that way. But yes, that is very much associated with love. You know, so yeah, we're going to unpack some of this today. But I think I think that it was such a great journey. Yeah, it really was, and
I learned so much. Yeah. So when you think about some of your key takeaways from this series, what would you say are some of yours?
One of the things that really resonated with me was that love or opening your heart is not just about projecting out. I'm going to, impart my heart on you, or I'm going to open my heart to you for you. It's not just about that. It all starts with ourselves. And it's not also about just pulling people in. It's about sometimes letting things go. In my head, that was an important distinction that, I think we think that love is to bring in, love is to embrace, love is, to collect or build community. And I believe that there's a lot of love associated with letting go and letting people soar, rise above, and making sure they have the tools to do that. But sending them off with love is very important. And I thought that was, to me, that came to mind in a couple of the episodes that we listened to. And I don't know why it came to mind for me at the time, but to me, that's a big distinction because I've always associated love with bringing in.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that Peter said regarding that, which really struck me, was he said, your son will say to you at some point, I am not the son that you expected. And that's part of that letting go piece, to say, you are your own person, and I need to allow you, or not even allow, because it's going to happen no matter what, right? It's his path. And if he's listening, he's more than I could have expected. So he's fabulous. But it is that part of letting go, is to say, I send you off with love. I send you off with my love, but also that you have love for your own path, and it will show up and look different than anything that I could have ever imagined. And what he's doing is nothing I could have imagined. It's so much bigger and more wonderful. So, yeah.
I think about you, as a matter of fact, in this, because you're kind of an empty nester now. You're still, I think you'll be one for a while. I don't think that's a thing that goes away overnight, right? It's transition.
Yeah.
But when what you were just talking about, I was thinking, I wonder if this, just knowing that or having that sense and feeling that, if it would help people who are going through empty nest syndrome, where they're desperately missing but not quite sure what to do next. It's that lost moment. If that would be a little less painful, if they embrace the idea of, you are off to become the person that you're going to be. You've had a foundation set, and go on and make it whatever you want to make it, or whatever you will. I don't know. It kind of reminds me of the circle of life kind of thing from,
Well, I think it's actually, what I would say is, it's probably for me, and this is really pertinent to what we're talking about here, as far as that it's an important part of the transition, opening our heart, transitioning, changing to a better world, is we think about the Bridges model and how every new beginning starts with an ending. And so there are real emotions there. There is pain every time we go through a transition. And that's just normal and natural and part of the process.
Right.
And sometimes just knowing this is normal, natural part of the process, helps us to deal with that and to see it and to recognize it. And I actually think that's such an important part of opening our heart with others.
Yes.
Is to be able to sit, and we know that as coaches, is to be able to just sit with that pain, with that person, and it's okay. That's part of that moving through, part of the transition, is to feel that pain. And once you can kind of feel it, deal with it, you can move on to that messy middle.
Right.
Not to the new beginning, but the messy middle. That's where I'm solidly at. What is this? What is this space? What's the possibilities now, before we even get to what the new beginning is?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So what other things came to mind as you were listening to all of these episodes over again? Because for our listeners to know, we do listen to our episodes over again. So yeah.
I think for me that it is a practice, not a process or an event, and it's an ongoing journey. So we heard that from so many people, and I think about Lindsay Godwin talking about curiosity and staying in the curiosity. That's not a process. It's just staying with it, suspending your judgment and staying with it. And so we saw that in so many of our guests that talked about that.
Yes, we did. I love actually the curiosity piece of it. I think that is such an important part of opening your heart. You were talking about this earlier, and if we go in with our opinions and with our perspectives, and we think we're right because that our stories in our heads are always right, for us.
Yeah.
But maybe not for everybody else. But to bring instead curiosity into it and being open to drinking in whatever we hear that is maybe completely different from what we ever thought. To me, there's a lot of heart in that. It's an opportunity to connect on a different level with people who may have a very different view of the world, and just having you listen to that can open a heart.
Yeah.
But also having you listen and embrace some of that can do volumes to opening a heart, right? It can change the way that relationship will go, the trajectory, right?
Yeah.
And to me, there's just something kind of special about that. And I loved that you were talking about that before we started the episode today, because I'm not sure initially that I was thinking that in those terms, but you're absolutely spot on in my view. My story in my head's telling me you're right.
Yeah. I think the other thing around that one particularly, I was thinking of Kirsten and her, I can't remember exactly what the story was, but essentially she wanted to make a change. And so she ended up going to another country and teaching art to these kids. Part of it was letting go, like you were talking about, letting go and of her current story and saying, what is new for me? Also, she didn't know what the end would be. And so it's that part of staying curious, staying present.
Yeah.
Because you can't necessarily plan A, B, C, D, and therefore E is my heart will be open. It's like I've got a little bit of faith, a little bit of trust here that if I keep going and staying curious and stay committed to my passion, essentially, that it will happen for me.
You know, what you just said kind of goes into another little area, which is that presence piece, right? Being present. Because, you know, if we are living in the past, or if we're thinking only of the past, or we're making actions based on our past, are we opening our hearts? Or are we responding to fears that we may have had, or, you know, or maybe not responding because of that? We're actually preventing ourselves from actually opening our hearts all the way. And if we're thinking only about what is it going to look like in the future, or, you know, what if they don't like me, or what if, those are things in the future that you can't do anything about. So the only thing that you really can do, I think, you know, to fully open your heart is to be present, to just let the moment happen, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was actually, Kirsten was a good example of that, because it, you know, she drew that out very, very clearly when she was talking about how, you know, she really didn't know. And her daughter, Regina, same thing, you know.
Yeah.
She wanted to learn a language, and she was struggling. So she moved to the country.
Yeah.
She moved to the country, and to me, that's very presence.
Yeah.
You know, she had no idea if she was ever going to get that language, right? But she stuck it out. She stayed in the country. She embraced it. She fell in love with the country. And she found new avenues for her future by staying in the present and paying attention. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of led to this as well, but that it's a process of experimentation. We have to keep trying. We don't actually know sometimes what it's going to be that actually is going to open our heart, but we'll feel it. We oftentimes feel it in our body, and it can be a warming, literally a warming of our heart. And sometimes it's tingles. It's like, oh, I feel this. I know this is actually my heart warming or opening.
I wonder if that's a little bit of joy. Do you remember when we were talking about the topic of joy?
Yeah.
And we were saying it's just that moment. It's just a moment, but it's like a moment of pure, you know, tingling or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's where joy starts, is in the heart, right?
Yeah.
It's not just, you know, my head thought that was really joyful. My head doesn't even think about that kind of stuff. You know, my heart, it starts in the heart. That's great.
Yeah. So trying different things, from the art to the music to whatever, but it's sort of pulling your heart, you know.
Yeah.
It's individual experiment. And it's something that we have to do ourselves. It's a choice.
Yes.
We can make a choice around that.
And you might want to talk about this a little bit more, because I think you kind of brought that up as you know, it doesn't have to be just about big moments, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that it can be something small. We just have to stay present for that. We were talking about how it could be something as big as changing your career, or it can be something as small as going for a walk in the woods, or even in your backyard, but staying present. I know something that opens my heart is watching the hummingbirds at the hummingbird feeder.
Oh, yeah.
And just something, you know, simple acts like that can open your heart. It doesn't have to be something huge and grand. And that makes it accessible to us, to anyone at any time, really. It's just that intention. It's like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to seek this out. Yeah.
You know, as you said that, I was thinking about what is it that sparks a person's heart? And it's different. You know, in business, we always talk about, oh, I'm a visual learner, or I'm, you know, I'm auditory. You know, I would rather hear it, or I need something written down. But the same thing goes with opening our hearts, because what really sparks me, you know, your heart opens up when you watch hummingbirds at the hummingbird feeder. You know? And mine is, you know, deer eating apples in my front yard.
Yeah.
or the irises that bloom out by my mailbox, or
Yeah.
something like that. Or it's just a neighbor throwing a ball to their dog, and just watching the expression on my neighbor's face when the dog catches it and starts to bring it back. It's sort of like there's that pure love, like, yeah, you did that. You did so well. It's the way people are with their children, right?
Yeah.
Or somebody who really wanted that car. And you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like, I love my car,
Yeah. What's interesting that came up, I think, a lot in through listening to our guests also was that it oftentimes, isn't always, but it oftentimes is in service to others.
Yes.
So opening our heart, we can't force it on others. If we're opening our own heart and we're doing it in service to others, so as we think about the music and the art and the working with the children, that also is a component that oftentimes helps us to open our hearts.
Interesting. That's interesting. As you were saying that, I was thinking, it's funny how there are a lot of people who live in service of others. They want to. That's their whole focus in life. It's a value, right? Living in service to others or of others is a way to also make ourselves feel better. Because if I'm doing a good job for someone else, or if I am helping someone and I see that they understand it or they get it or they're better or they feel better or they feel valued or they feel loved, right? Who's going to get the big feeling is the person who gave them that, or helped them get to that. Coaches or just somebody who on the street stops and talks to somebody for a moment, right? It's a charge for both people.
Yeah.
So I think, that's the cool thing about opening your heart is you also benefit from it every single time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So what can leaders take away from this series? For me, one of the things that I heard really strongly is it starts with you. So because it is personal, as a leader, if we're asking our employees to be open-hearted, that we have to be open-hearted too. We have to understand what are our triggers for opening our heart.
Yeah. And, we think about, we've talked about this often, that we want leaders to be the example. And so I guess, how do we know what a good example is or what an example is? Or how do we know how to experiment if we've never experienced it ourselves or if we haven't recognized it? And so I think it's almost an intentional thing. You have to be looking for places where somebody has opened their heart and you've experienced it. I know when I do, there's a feeling I get, right? And I like that feeling. So if I'm a leader and I want others to have that feeling because it's important that it moves us forward or whatever, I need to experiment with how I'm going to reach out or how I'm going to embrace and I'm going to have to be pretty mindful of how it's landing, right?
Yeah.
So, and that takes a little bit of attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you brought this up earlier, but I do think when we think about going first, leaders sharing some vulnerability does actually help people open up their heart to you. Because you're opening it's that example, I guess. You're opening your heart. You're sharing some of your vulnerability. It might be a mistake that you made or a challenge that you're currently in. But it is pretty amazing when you have the courage to do that as a leader. It allows other people to also do that.
No, they relate, right?
Yeah.
They relate to it because they've had those experiences in their lives. And if they look up to you as a leader and they think you're up on a pedestal and, they must have, look where they are. They must have never done anything wrong to get to this moment. And that's not true. Often leaders are the people who have made a ton of mistakes to get there, but they've learned along the way, right? Mm-hmm. And so when a leader's vulnerable, or when anybody is vulnerable with other people and they're in a trusting environment, it can do nothing more than just bring people at some point to a heart level where their hearts meet, because yeah, we do have something in common. We did have that experience together or alike. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Also, when we think about leaders and how they can open their heart, it goes back to what we're talking about as far as service. Leadership, all leadership is really in service to others and to our team. So thinking about how can we help lift other people up? It can, and I said our team, but it can also be your peers. It can actually be your leader.
That's right.
So thinking about all those sort of 360, how can I support those people in a way that creates connection and community and creates opportunity for them also to open their heart?
Oh, you said something and I thought, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be lovely? You said 360, right? And I would hope and I would love it if we could somehow get those people who answer 360s or, fill them out for one person, if they understood that's what we were looking for. Open your heart to this person and give your feedback based on that. And if the person who's getting the feedback, if they could be set up on the front end that, open your heart and realize that these people came from that perspective, or from a place of love, right?
Yeah.
And I think that might change the way some of those land sometimes, because it's hard to get feedback.
Yeah.
Especially, it's not hard to get feedback if it's good. Right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard to get it if it's constructive.
Yeah.
But I really don't believe anybody would answer something in a very constructive way without having their heart in the right place to do that, with wanting that person to, have an opportunity to grow in a certain area, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then I think my last one, I know there's a lot of things we could talk about, and this kind of goes to a little bit of what we were just saying, but that leaders need to hold the expectation for our teams and those around us. That presence and that opening your heart is important, and structures that allow that. And part of this goes to the fact that if you are completely overloaded with work, if you're running really, really hard, there's probably not the time for you to actually take that moment for the connection, to have the pause, to have intention and attention to the team members around us, which creates that opening of the heart, which creates that connection. And so what is it as leaders that we can do to create opportunities and for us to be mindful of how are we setting our people up for this to actually happen? And we know that when it does, results are so much better. People give each other the benefit of the doubt. They ask, how can I help you? They give constructive, not critical feedback. Like there's so many things that happen and blossom when you have open hearts, but it doesn't happen in an environment where we're just overloading our people and they're totally stressed out.
One of our most recent examples of how that was done effectively in a lot of businesses was when we had the pandemic. And people had to work, right? And leaders were trying to connect with their people because they knew it was traumatic for folks. People were losing people or people were sick themselves, right? And so we saw the hearts opened up during that time in a lot of places. To me, it reminds me of when I worked in San Francisco, we had a big earthquake. And all of a sudden, leaders and employees were talking from a heart stand instead of from any other, any other pedestal. And it was wonderful. It actually brought leaders and employees closer together. And then after recovery, it never went away. It became a part of the culture. And I love that. And that's sort of what you're talking about. I think that presence and that intention and all that, it sounds like you need to plan for it and you need to write a strategy about it. But actually, it doesn't have to be quite that formal. But it can actually shift a culture. Absolutely shift a culture. And wouldn't it be cool if we had more cultures or microcultures actually that led to a bigger, more healthy, more loving environment where
Yeah.
people wanted to come to work or people wanted to do whatever they were doing because it served a greater good, or because it made them feel that they added value for others. And, to me, that would be just heaven. That's like utopia, right? But why not? Really?
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. Why not? Why not take steps towards that?
Yeah.
It's a worthy endeavor, I would say. So we hope that you enjoyed this special series as much as we did.
Yeah.
We kept coming up with more and more possible guests and things like that. So you might see some of those people arriving later this year. We just couldn't quite fit them in during this time period. But the people that we did have just so inspired me. And so even though we're going to end the series, I think we aren't going to end the conversation.
No, I agree with you. And I'm just so grateful. I think that this was a good series for us to do. It really was. And I think it was good for our listeners. This is a good time to be touching on stuff like this. It should always be a good time to touch on it. But why not now, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to thank our listeners for coming along on this ride with us. I think that it was a lot of fun. We're not ending the podcast, by the way. We are just, ending this series.
Yeah. And if you missed any of the episodes, we hope that you'll go back and listen to them, because they'll be there for you. And we think that they're definitely worth a listen.
Absolutely.
So, and we'd love your feedback. Send us an email on the different platforms. A lot of them you can actually give feedback right there. Yes. We would love that. And let us know also who else you'd like to hear us talk with. So let's keep the conversation going. If you have questions or comments about the show, you can find us on all our social media channels at @lifting_leaders. We have so many exceptional podcast episodes coming up with more fantastic guests. So be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. If you know someone who might find this episode inspiring or informative, share it with them, text them, email them, or take a screenshot and share it on your Instagram and tag us at @lifting_leaders. If you'd like to know more about us, our guests, or the show, please go to our website at liftingleaderspodcast.com. You'll find our show notes there as well. If you're looking for help in developing your leaders or would like a growth opportunity yourself through leader coaching, please contact us through our website at www.liftingleaderspodcast.com. Thank you to Ari Chance Roberts for his technical support of our show. And finally, please take 30 seconds and follow us. It helps you because you never miss an episode, and it helps us because you never miss an episode. To follow us, go to the Lifting Leaders Podcast show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen. Then just tap the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner or click on follow. While you're there, if you'd be willing to give us a 5-star rating and review and share the episode with a friend, we'd be so grateful. Thank you, Trisha.
Thank you, Crystal. It was fun. It was a fun series.
It was fun.
Wonderful.
Many thanks to you, our listeners. We appreciate you. Find ways every day to lift each other up. Have a fantastic week.